Okay, so today we're going to be doing evolution or a revision of evolution by natural selection. This is our learning outcome, what you should be able to do. You need to be able to outline evolution by natural selection. Now, outline means make a summary of. So I'm going to go over it in a broad, larger sense, and then at the end of this, we're going to pin it down to that basic summary that you need to know. Okay, two main scientists involved in this work. Charles Darwin got all the credit for all of the work, and there was also Alfred Russel Wallace that also discovered evolution by natural selection. But Darwin, as you know, got all of the credit pretty much. So, a question that these guys had, and what was the origin of species? So we can see there's lots of different species here, and if you look outside your window, you can probably see lots of different types of birds, grass, plants, and animals. So how did these come about? That's the big question that they had. What was the origin, the beginning of all of these species? Now, Darwin went to the Galapagos Islands and he studied finches in particular. And he noticed that there was these different types of finches, different species of finches. And he noticed that they had different shaped beaks and different things like that. So, again, his question was, how did these species come about? Now, Darwin went about explaining it. And one of the big things that he noticed when he started to look at these birds was variation. Now, variation just means that there's a difference, okay? And he noticed that, okay, variation from within the same species, there are differences within the same species. So we can see here that we've got loads of different birds, but one of them is just randomly red. And this happens sometimes. This is called a genetic mutation, okay? And genetic mutations happen on your genes, so happen on your DNA. They're totally random, and they can happen to the offspring, to the babies of different plants and animals. Okay, so step one, he knows variation. Step two, he noticed what is called overproduction, sometimes also called overpopulation. And this means that, let's say, a bird in this case has many offspring. So over the lifespan of some particular birds, they might have 20, 30, or even more offspring themselves. So this is called overproduction. There are too many birds available, or too many of a species available for the amount of food that is also around. So if there's too many birds available for the amount of food that's around, what is this going to lead to? So this is going to lead to competition. All right, so first step that we talked about was variation. Second step we talked about was our overproduction. Third step we're talking about now is competition. So competition means that literally, and it could be plants as well, plants and animals are competing for resources. There's not enough resources to go around. Now, not all of these are going to survive, but the ones that do survive, that do get enough food, those ones are better suited to their environment. Okay, so this means that the beneficial genes, the ones that are best suited to their environment, will move on and are more likely to have offspring and have more babies and pass on those genes. Right then. Now, coming on to our natural selection part of this. So here we've got an example of three different giraffes. Okay, some of them with short necks, some of them with long necks. Now, the adaptation here is the length of the neck of the giraffe. So this giraffe has a nice long neck. It's got a nice adaptation for getting the leaves. But in terms of natural selection, this means that the organisms that are best suited to their environment are more likely to survive. So in terms of natural selection, the leaves are up high. Okay, that's the environment. And the giraffe best suited to its environment will also pass on its genes. So again, the adaptation is the long neck. Natural selection is how the environment dictates that the giraffe needs a long neck. Okay, evolution then is the genetic change in a species over a very long period of time. Now, in terms of how long, it can be millions of years that we're talking about. So over many millions of years, we eventually have a new species, okay, and that's how giraffes came about with their very long necks. So going back to Darwin and his question, he determined then that all of the different species of birds that he noticed were originated from one species that came from maybe South America to the Galapagos Islands. So these are branches off, these are original species, or sorry, this is the original species here. And over time, it has branched off into different types of species. Now, this is the exact same for us, for humans as well. There's a common misconception that we evolved from chimpanzees or we evolved from monkeys, and that is not true whatsoever. The truth is that here we have humans and here we have chimpanzees. So we have actually a common ancestor. So if you go back in time, there's a place where this branches apart. And there was a species at one time that branched apart, and one route went off to form humans and one route went off to form chimpanzees. So just to say that clearly again, humans and chimpanzees have a common ancestor. Gorillas and humans have a common ancestor further back along the line. Orangutans and humans have a common ancestor even further back along the line. So we didn't evolve from them, we have a common ancestor. Right then, so Charles Darwin kept on extrapolating this back, so he went further and further back. And he published his book on the origin, on the beginning of species, which suggested that all organisms, all living things, all plants and animals have one common ancestor. Now that's an amazing thing to say. So if you look outside your window again, all of those birds, all of those flies or bumblebees that you can see outside at the moment, the grass and the trees, we are all related. We all have a common ancestor. Okay, so this is a nice picture of a tree of life that is sometimes used to describe this. So from the origin at the very bottom here, at the beginning, is one single species, and then from that, all of the different species that exist today branched out from that single species, and we are talking about millions and millions of years for that to happen. Now, there's loads of evidence for evolution, and this is a really good video. Okay, I want you to have a look at this video. This is called "What is the evidence for evolution?" Just type that into Google, and this video comes up. One of the main bits of evidence that to talk about is the different bones that we see in different animals. Right then, the key terms that you need to know. Genetic mutation is a random change in DNA. Variation, the difference between living things in a species. Overproduction, that's when too many of a species is produced. Competition, because there's too many species or too many offspring produced, they have to compete against each other for food. Survival of the fittest, the ones that are best suited to their environment survive. Inheritance, that's how your DNA is passed from parents onto their offspring. Adaptation, how living things are specialized to suit their environment. So that could be, for example, you've got teeth. Teeth are an excellent adaptation for eating food. Evolution is the process by which living things can gradually change over a long period of time, and eventually, over time, forming new species. And then finally, a species is a group of living things with very similar characteristics. So you can take, for example, beetles are a great example. There are loads of different types of beetles, and many different species as well. So how are we doing? Let's see. So explain this picture now in terms of variation, adaptation, and natural selection. Pause it now, have a go at that. Right then, I hope you had a good go at that. Variation. Okay, from our picture here, we can see that we've got two different moths and they vary in color. Okay, so the offspring are different. The adaptation. Well, the white moth is better suited to its environment because the bark of the tree that it's on is also white. And in terms of natural selection, well, if a predator was to come along right now, which moth do you think it's going to eat? Okay, it's definitely going to eat the black moth because it stands out more. The white moth is better camouflaged. You might be able to see here, okay, the adaptation of this owl is its excellent camouflage. Okay, if you look closely here, the adaptation of this frog is that it's really well camouflaged as well. And this is one of my favorite creatures, okay? This is called the dead leaf butterfly. Its adaptation is that it looks like a dead leaf. Right then, if you look carefully here, you can see an animal. I'll let you try find that. Now, this is our learning outcome again. And we now need to be able to make a summary of the key points of evolution by natural selection. And if one thing is really important from this whole lesson now, it's this slide. Okay, you need to learn this off by heart. These 4 points. In summary, evolution by natural selection. Each species shows variation. Now we're taking the example of just a giraffe here. Some giraffes have long necks, some giraffes have short necks. There is competition within each species for food, living space, water, etc. So here they are competing this thing. Get off my land, go away. Okay. Step 3. The better adapted members of these species are more likely to survive. This is called survival of the fittest. Okay, we can see the giraffe with the long neck is eating the leaves off the tree. Short neck, not able to. Okay, it's too short. What's going to happen to the giraffes with the short necks? Okay, they are not going to survive. They're going to go extinct, dead. Giraffes with long necks, they're the ones that we see today because they have a long necks and they have survived. Now, because they have survived, they are able to reproduce. So these survivors will pass on their better genes to their offspring, who will also show this beneficial variation. So here we've got the giraffe with the long neck making some babies also with long necks. Okay, really important slide. That is your summary. Okay, so from our whole learning outcome, you need to be able to reproduce this in your exam. That's a summary of it. And if you want to go a bit extra, this is a really good lecture. Okay, it's an hour long on YouTube and very, very interesting. I highly recommend it. Okay, I hope you found this useful. Best of luck in the rest of your studies.